Hey guys, Chris with Nichols Retirement Empire down here in the park here in Richmond Hill, and I just walked and it is hot. I mean, to get you to understand what it's like down here when it gets 90 degrees, go in your bathroom and get a big heavy towel, soak it in hot water, walk outside, lay it over your face, and breathe through it. That's what it's like down here. It's so humid. 4th of July is coming up. 4th of July. And being a ex-history teacher, I don't know, I started thinking about our history, the founding, the 4th of July, 1776, the Declaration of Independence and all that kind of stuff. It's, you know what's so funny about it is I'm not a person that thinks that you should look at history through the lens of what you think is right and wrong and legal and illegal and all that stuff. Now you can't, it's revisionist history. You can't go back and look at it and reassess it. You have to take it for what it was at that time. People like to go back and look at things and assess whether something was successful or unsuccessful or right or wrong or whatever. It's not a good way to look at historical things. For example, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, the founding fathers, okay, there were 55, I think, considered founding fathers that, I guess, signed the Declaration. Do you realize that, and y'all are going to love this, the oldest person that was there was probably 40. There were guys there. There were guys signing that thing that were 21, 20, I think as young as 19 years old. I mean, the people that were there that were representing their colonies from around, the original 13 colonies were young men, very young. And, we always in the United States kind of have the idea that, man, these young people are just, they're crazy. They don't, every generation that comes along thinks that the young people are out of control or, too radical or too whatever. The people that we now look at and go, man, these young people are crazy. They're too, idealistic. They're too radical or whatever. Those were the ones that were signing the Declaration of Independence back then. For one, people didn't live as long, just in general. They didn't have the technology we have now. People that young were in positions that now we wouldn't particularly expect them to be in. They were the representatives of their area, that kind of thing. So that's one thing that's really unique about the whole thing, is those people were very young. And we get the idea, the people that signed that and the world that they were living in was like, that they think like we think now. They didn't. Not at all. Like, we look at it now and we look at the Declaration of Independence and we think, yeah, we had some really good reasons for declaring our independence from Britain, man. We were just being so oppressed and so, it was horrible the way the king, we probably had the least, viable, good reasons for declaring a revolution ever. We did not have a good reason to declare ourselves, we did not have a good legal reason. We just didn't. We were not being oppressed, particularly, you go through history and you look at revolutions and things that were happening to people and how their government was treating them, or how their king or their czar or their whatever emperor was treating them. You can see why there was a rebellion. We had no good reason. We could practice whatever religion we wanted to, unless you lived in a colony that restricted your freedom of religion. But as far as England was concerned, as far as the United Kingdom was concerned, we could practice whatever religion we wanted. We could pretty much live, we could own weapons, we could own property, we had more freedom than anybody in Great Britain. We could do whatever we wanted. We could go where we wanted within reason in the 13 colonies. We had it made as far as a general, in general, a group of people. We had been here 150 years already. We had established, people that would have had no name, nothing, came from nothing, had become educated, had owned property, there were all these things, advantages that we had. Our taxes were very low compared to what people in Britain paid. If you lived in Great Britain, you owed a debt to the king in many things, in service, in your, you had to fight in the wars. They couldn't live where they wanted to live. They couldn't go where they wanted to go. They couldn't do what they wanted to do. If you were in the nobility, you were above everybody else, but you still owed an obligation. You had duties that you had to fulfill. And in America, we didn't have any of that. We were the most free people probably on the planet in that period of time. And we were used to doing whatever we wanted to do for the last 100-something years and going wherever we wanted to go. Now, yeah, if you got into debt, you still had laws, you still had regulations, you still had, societal norms and things like that, things you could do and couldn't do and stuff like that. But if you were adventurous enough and you were willing to go out in places and put your life on the line, or put everything you have on the line and go out and live somewhere and take some property and fight against Native Americans and do what you could do it. You could go do it. We were upwardly mobile. If you wanted to become a merchant and you were able and talented enough to get enough education to get in with somebody and acquire some kind of wealth and you could do it. It was unheard of in Britain to be able to do something like that. And this is my basic take on American history. People in America don't like anybody from anywhere else telling them what to do. And I think we had gotten to the point of being able to do what we wanted to do for so long that when Britain decided, when the king decided he needed to start instilling, we needed to start paying our way in the British Empire, we didn't want to. We didn't like it. And we didn't understand how they lived in a world that were real threats to each other, and they would fight wars and they would take each other's territory, and they were living in a place where they needed an army and they needed a navy and they needed to defend themselves against enemies, real enemies that were real threats. We were living off in a colony where the only threats that we really had, we didn't really have any international threats to speak of, because we were a colony of Britain. And who would try to take a colony of Britain? Spain or France. But, they were busy fighting each other over in Europe. Now, there were wars that happened here, and there were battles and stuff like that happened. And, we'd try to take each other's territory and stuff like that. But those were like frontier skirmishes. And we weren't, in a situation where our government needed to control us that much. And whenever they did try to control us, we would go nutso. And when we said that we had inalienable rights, which were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what is that? Those are so vague. That is so, basically we were just saying, look, we have a right to do anything we want. and you can't tell us what to do. That's what we were saying. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those aren't legal terms. That's just, hey, we should get to do whatever we want. You shouldn't tell us what to do. We had no reason whatsoever to declare our independence from Britain. If we'd have tried to do that 100 years later, I don't know if we could have done it. But we just happened to do it during a time where Britain had to maintain, military presence in so many other places in the world. They couldn't commit enough resources to come over here and put us in our place. And in reality, when we declared independence from Britain, if you went around and you got the average person on the street's opinion of what they wanted to do, you had those people that were, the founding fathers that were very idealistic, and they had a good reason to want independence besides just idealism and just wanting to do what they wanted to do. They stood to gain financially by having more freedom from Britain. They really did, for the most part. And again, a lot of it was just idealistic reasons why we wanted to be free. But if you ask the average person, probably about a third of the people, and this is stretching it, probably about a third of the people thought like they did. Like, we just wanted independence. We didn't want to keep. We wanted to be free, do what we wanted to do. And then you had a third of the people that said, no, we should remain loyal to Britain and remain a colony of Britain. That's the reason we're here to start with, is because Britain allowed it, and because they maintain our security by having their army, and that, the fact that we're a British colony is what makes us successful, and so we need to be loyal to Britain. And then you probably had a third of the people that lived out wherever, and they were like, look, man, I don't care who the government is, as long as you leave me alone. Let me live my life, because chances are I'm only going to live to be about 35 years old or 40, and let me live my short life in some kind of peace. That's what most people thought. And then you had a portion that were slaves and had no, I'm sure they didn't care who, because I'm already a piece of property to some person, who's going to own me the rest of my life. I'm sure they didn't care whether we were free or part of Britain or whatever. So, most people in the United States were not all biting at the bit to declare our independence from Britain. It was only a small number of people. And, luckily we lived in a time period where all we had to do was manage to not give up, because Britain could only send so many people. They could only spend so much money and so much time messing with us. And when it became to the time where it wasn't profitable for them to win us back, they let us have our independence. we were able just to kind of hang around in there long enough and win enough battles here and there, and be enough of a pain in Britain's side where they finally said, okay, whatever. You guys, you've been a pain the whole time you've been a colony, so go to it. Have your own country. And what's so funny is, we wanted independence and to do what we wanted to do so bad. And when we set up our original government, it was just like every colony could do whatever they wanted. It was a disaster. We couldn't, And what we began to find out is, what? Now we have to defend ourselves. We can't depend on Britain anymore. Now our government needs tax money. And now our government needs laws. And now our government is telling us what to do. We ended up, today, the government has more of a direct impact on your life and how you live your life than the King of England ever had on the original 13 colonies. And now our government taxes us astronomically compared to what the taxes were back then. The restrictions that we have are huge compared to what, but you know what? We still have all this freedom. We still have a ton of freedom. But, the idea of our government was the taxes were too much, and they weren't really allowing us a say in our government, and nobody was listening to us, and the government looked down on us and didn't think we knew. That's the way we felt back then. And today we feel more like that than ever. The idea that we were being mistreated back then today is laughable by our government. It really is. But when people are idealistic, and those are the most dangerous people there are, people that are very idealistic in either direction, whether it's liberal or conservative, people that are super idealistic, want to do things and want to push things into places where the average person's like, look, man, I just want to live my life. I want the government to do the things that the government needs to do, and other than that, leave me alone. And that's, how the average person thinks. They don't want to impose their ideas on other people or impose, whatever. They just want to be able to live their life. And idealistic people want to impose their ideas on other people because the other people don't understand how smart the idealistic people are. And then, only back then, if you were idealistic at the right period of time in history, you could get by with something like the American Revolution, because our people were different than anybody else. We lived in a place, in a time that was completely and totally unique, and we were able to get by with something that was crazy. If you go back and study revolutions throughout history and how they played out and how bloody and how long they took and how they and look at ours and how short it was and how relatively bloodless it was compared to some of these other revolutions, like the Russian Revolution and the French Revolution. We lucked out in the United States. We really did. So that is my take on the American Revolution. Happy 4th of July. Chris, are you glad we gained independence from Britain? Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's great that our country, was able to do things that other countries only dreamed of, and develop a government that only other countries never, had the opportunity to do, and establish a republic and a democracy. I'm glad it worked out for those guys back then. But if I'd have lived back then, would I have been for it? I'd probably not. Probably would have been like, look, man, can't we just, let's just work and make some money. Anyway, the main thing is, don't tell me what to do. I'm an American, and I want to do anything I want to, and when you start telling me what to do, I get mad. And I may have a, reaction like the Founding Fathers.